The Barbarian Betrayal. Chapter 18. And I'm telling you, Prime Minister, that once we lost the Zyrax system, we lost containment, Field Marshal Fujimoto growled. As of this moment, all bets are off. I've issued orders to all military personnel that any unidentified vessel gets exactly one chance to prove they're friendly before they open fire. Leandra Sine just stared at her. And what if they're simply having communication problems? She countered. You'll destroy them anyway? You're damn right I will, Helene fired back. The same holds true for any Ronin spotted on the ground. If they can't prove they're uninfected, my orders are shoot to kill. Do you realize what you're saying? The Prime Minister demanded. You've just declared open season on all Ronin. You're talking genocide! You don't think I know that? The Field Marshal snapped. We had exactly one chance to contain this, and now that chance is gone. Even with the extreme measures I'm taking, Leandra, I won't lie to you. I don't like the odds. The military officer seemed to deflate as she finally admitted the truth. If I were you, I'd dust of those evacuation procedures. You're likely to need them. The Prime Minister looked away, shuddering in horror as she contemplated the reality they were now facing. Is there nothing you can do? She whispered. Maybe, she said at last. There is a plan, but it's a long shot. I wouldn't hold your breath. Leandra Singh nodded as she gathered her strength. We've been in tough situations before, and managed to find our way out. I'm not giving up on us. Not yet. I wish I could share your optimism, Helene Fujimoto said quietly. Because if it fails, I'm authorizing Operation Blackout. Her counterpart could only stare in shock as she confirmed her worst fears. The complete sterilization of every Ronin world in the Tetrarchy. Security was tight as the shuttle docked with Chiron. All personnel were thoroughly screened before being allowed on board. But once they made their way through the gauntlet, General Nasat was there to greet them. Hey, boss, Tango grinned as they shook hands. As promised, I gathered up the rest of the old farts, she chuckled, indicating the three men behind her. Nasat nodded at each of them in turn. It is good to have you here, he told them. Time grows short if we are to have any chance of preventing a Holocaust. Tango grimaced. Damn it. Fujimoto's getting ready to pull the trigger, isn't she? Operation Blackout. She is, Nasat confirmed, which is why your mission must be successful. I mean, we'll try, Tango shrugged, but we're way off the reservation on this one. It is the last chance we have, the Sorator countered. You must see it through. All I can promise is we'll give you our best, she answered. After that? Tango shrugged once more before changing gears. I brought you something, by the way, she said somewhat cryptically. I figured you wouldn't want to wait. Wait for what? Nasat asked in confusion. Tango turned back to face the airlock and made a motion to come forward. Two young Soratars stepped cautiously onto the deck dressed in privates' uniforms, one bearing the Red Cross armband of a healer, before snapping to attention. Privates Taichist and Chechla reporting for duty, sir, his son belted out in perfect parade ground style. Nasat could only stare open-mouthed at his children before finally remembering where he was. At ease, he said at last as he went to them and folding them both in his arms. They returned his hug stiffly at first, uncomfortable in this new environment, but the fierceness of their father's emotions soon overwhelmed them. How? He whispered, as he finally released them, stepping back to gaze at them both. How are you both here so soon? They're running them through an accelerated basic these days, Tango informed him. Even faster than when you got drafted. He winced at the news, knowing all too well just how inadequate his own training had been so many years before. Are you both well? He asked, finally finding his voice. We are, father, Chechla smiled. It is good to see you again. And you, he smiled, his eyes misting as he took in her uniform. You look so like your mother did when we first met, he said softly. Chechla blushed while Tango chuckled. And I was just saying how much Taichist reminded me of you back on Uzonks, she smirked, when you were a wet-behind-the-ears greenhorn. Now it was his son's turn to blush, as Nasat fought to inject some much-needed composure into the situation. I was never that young, he snorted, drawing chuckles all around. Unfortunately, the moment soon passed. With a heavy sigh, he returned his focus to the group of humans. "We must get you prepped as quickly as possible," he informed them. "I have convinced the Field Marshal to hold off on Blackout until after your mission, but she will not wait forever." Tango nodded. "Understood." She turned to the others. "Let's get briefed and geared up then," she told them. Tychus stepped forward and snapped to attention. "Sir, I request permission to join the team on its mission." Chekla looked at her brother in surprise. Obviously, he hadn't discussed this with her beforehand. But in a heartbeat, she made up her mind and stepped forward as well. "Sir, I also request permission to join the team." Nasat stared at the pair in disbelief before a scowl came over his face. "Request denied," he snapped. The curt dismissal caught Tychus off guard. "But, sir," he began. "I said your request was denied, Private," he snarled. "You have no idea what they are about to drop into, but I can assure you that I do. You are not ready. You will likely never be ready. Not for that." Their shocked faces tore at him, but that only seemed to harden his resolve. "I already lost your mother to war," he told them, the pain still fresh in his voice. "And I won't let it take you as well." "I won't." His daughter stepped forward, reaching out to touch his arm. "Father," she began, only to be cut off. "You are dismissed," he said coldly. "Report to the XO for birthing assignment." They stared at him, unable to believe this personality shift, but that only angered him further. "I said dismissed," he snarled. The pair snapped to attention. Basic training had ended only a few days earlier, and some lessons take time to unlearn. They marched out of the compartment without another word. Tango sighed and looked at the rest of the team. "Give us a moment, will you?" Muswashi nodded, ushering the others out as well, following in the children's wake. Nasat had turned away, staring at one of the monitors as Tango joined him. "Did you put him up to it?" he asked, icicles dangling from every word. "Of course not," she sighed. "And if I'd known he was going to pull a stunt like that, I would have talked him out of it." "Then why?" he demanded. "Why would he make such a foolhardy request?" The human just rolled her eyes. "Come on, you can't be that obtuse." His eyes flashed dangerously. "Tango, I'm in no mood for your shenanigans. Speak plainly or get out." A dark look passed across her own face. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "You want to know why he volunteered? Why they both did. It's because of you." Nasat blinked in shock. "Me?" "Yes, you," she pressed. "Did you ever stop for a moment and consider how you appear in their eyes? You're not just their father, you're Nasat, the hero of the Tetrarchy, personally responsible for ending not one, but 2 wars. You once carried the Marshal's baton yourself, as you may recall, and you've got more medals than you do prayer robes. You're a hero in their eyes, and they want you to be proud of them." The Soratar winced and looked away. "I never wanted any of that," he said hoarsely. "Doesn't matter," Tango shrugged as she folded her arms and leaned against the bulkhead. "To them, you're this larger-than-life character. They want to be worthy of you, of that image, and given how you earned it, they're convinced the only way to do that." She left the rest dangling. "Dear Creator," he whispered. It was several long moments before he could find the words. "I must go to them," he said at last. "Try to explain." "Don't," she told him. "You'll just make it worse. After that little rant of yours, I can guarantee they're more determined than ever to go out there and prove themselves to you." "But I must do something," he said plaintively. "Look, I'll talk to them," she said gently. "They're more likely to listen to me than you at the moment. Just don't expect miracles." She shrugged. "'Cause they're young and convinced they'll live forever, and you have some mighty big shoes to fill." Nasat blinked. "Tango, I do not wear shoes." She sighed and shook her head. 30 years and still no sense of humor. The Barbarian Betrayal. Chapter 19. Over the Ronin World S-10, it was the destroyer Typhon that had drawn picket duty. Like almost every other system, they were incredibly undermanned, but at least it had been quiet duty. There had been no attempts to run the blockade, and despite a fair amount of grumbling from the inhabitants, there had been no instances of violence. The crew of Typhon thanked their lucky stars and maintained a close watch. That all changed when the Zyrak system fell. A flash alert was sent to every ship in the fleet, with special priority given to those vessels enforcing the quarantine. Typhon's captain put the crew on round-the-clock watches, determined not to be caught off guard should the worst happen. She knew she couldn't keep it up forever, but if they could just make it through the initial blitz, they might just have a chance. It was a half-finished battlecruiser that arrived in the system, plowing its way through the void and soaking up the antimatter rounds hurled at it by the desperate crew of Typhon. It was little more than a floating debris field by time it entered S-10's S atmosphere, but the damage was already done. The Ronin that had survived the battle boarded the destroyer and tore through the crew like a particle beam, sending the ravaged ship hurtling towards the planet. S-10 went dark 15 hours later, and the final images from the planet before the last bastion fell to the infected was the stuff of nightmares. Diaksh, sensors are reporting incoming vessels, Harbinger's tactical officer informed him. The look on his face told him the rest, though he dutifully finished the dispatch. Sir, it is the enemy. Giaj Guyaz nodded. The news, while unwelcome, was not unexpected. Status of the freighters and time until the enemy arrives at Zeus? He asked. His officer checked his display. Boarding of the refugees is 0.91% complete, he said at last. The enemy will be within weapons range in less than an hour. The Diaksh tried not to wince at the news, and failed. So close they had been so close. Understood, he answered. Inform the freighters they are to break orbit immediately, while the rest of the fleet will take position to buy them time. And with that, Giaj mused, I have ordered their deaths. Still, they were Konhim. They all knew what was at stake, and a chance to die in battle, protecting their young, was an act worthy of song. Assuming anyone survived to tell the tale, of course. At once, Diaksh! The officer replied as the orders were passed. The freighters began to move, and he tried not to think of those he was abandoning. But if those lumbering ships did not depart immediately, then no one would escape, and that was unacceptable. It was a war, after all, and in war, sacrifices must be made. Strange how little comfort that brought him when it was children being sacrificed. The fleet moved to interpose itself between the enemy and the escaping ships. They would do all they could to slow down the Ronin masters, but given their experiences at Zuj, he held out little hope. At best, if they opted for a fighting withdrawal while covering the freighters, some of his fleet would survive, perhaps one ship in 10. So be it. Those ships with the most damage are to cover the freighters and retreat with them as they depart the system, Giaj ordered, while the rest of the fleet will form up here, he instructed, highlighting a set of coordinates on the display. We will interlock our fields of fire and present an impenetrable wall to the enemy. His tactical officer smiled. They shall regret coming to Zeus, Diaksh, he said with a formal bow, as once again his directives were passed to the other ships. The fleet split into two, the defenders and the refugees. He could only imagine how the crews of those vessels escaping must feel, gnashing their teeth in frustration while being ordered to run like cowards. But they could no longer afford to act like clan chiefs and warlords, not if the Konhim were to survive as a race. It had been a bitter, painful lesson to learn, but he had taken it to heart nonetheless. Giaj Guyaz watched as the enemy ships drew closer. There would be no delaying his fire here, as the masters would soon render his task force down into scattered fragments. Every unfired missile would simply be added to the debris field. He waited as long as he dared, and then raised his hand, preparing to give the order. Diaksh! His tactical officer shouted. New vessels are entering the system! Giaj spun to look at the display, as the icons on the monitor turned from unidentified yellow to friendly green. It is the Earth Force fleet, he said somewhat unnecessarily, as the grizzled Konhim warrior shook his head. The timing was fortuitous, to say the least. Hail the commander, he ordered. Moments later, a human female appeared on the screen. Diaksh Guyaz, I'm Admiral Otsoa, aboard the battleship Buenos Aires. I understand you're having trouble with some uninvited guests. Despite everything, he couldn't help but chuckle. One had to admire the human's wit in the face of overwhelming odds. We are indeed, Admiral, he nodded in acknowledgement. If you would do us the honor of shepherding our children and damaged vessels to safety, the remainder of my forces will buy time for your escape. Uh-huh, she replied somewhat coolly. Somehow, I had a feeling you might say that. she sighed, shaking her head. I'm sure you're telling yourself today's a good day to die and all, but here's a thought. Why don't we see if maybe tomorrow might be better? Jiaj blinked. I do not understand. The human admiral snorted. Then I'll make it simple. Get your pig-headed ass out of there. With the ships under my command, we have more than enough between us to keep the enemy off our backs, while we cover the freighters. So you can either stay there and die, or come with me and live. His nostrils flared with barely controlled anger. Honor is not so easily dismissed, Admiral, he growled. Zes is our world, and we will defend it to the last. And die doing so, she fired back. Answer me one question, Diakshkuyaz. When it comes to a choice between honor and victory, which is more important? He readied an indignant retort to hurl back at her, when honesty forced him to reconsider. After all, it was a question he had asked himself often enough these last few decades. Of course, the ready answer was that victory without honor was no victory at all. But as he considered her words, he discovered it was not quite that simple. She was not suggesting that he surrender Z's to the enemy, for it was an inescapable truth the Masters would take the planet no matter what he did, even if the human fleet joined him in battle. They might delay the inevitable, but they could not stop it. And if they could not prevent the enemy from taking this system, did he not owe it to those that served him to preserve their lives if he could? To give them a chance to truly strike a damaging blow? When he framed the question in that context, the answer became clear. Despite how it cut across every tradition and belief of his people, the human's argument could not be denied. Very well, he said at last, though many of my officers will be difficult to convince. You're the Diaksh, aren't you? She smirked. Tell them if they have a problem with it, they can challenge your authority. Though to actually do that, they'll have to follow you out of the system. She chuckled briefly, before her eyes grew hard. Or you could simply order the first officer to shoot the captain in the head. Jiaj raised an eyebrow at that, an unusual sentiment from a human. Not really, she said after a moment. By any chance, do you recognize the name of my flagship? He blinked in confusion at the sudden change of topic. A quick glance at the monitor reminded him of the strange human name, Buenos Aires, though for some odd reason it struck a familiar chord. He had seen an intelligence report on that class of ship, the latest and most powerful vessels Earth Force possessed. They were named for... Everything came into sudden focus as the name finally registered. The Buenos Aires class of ships, 16 vessels in all, each named for a city obliterated by the Konhim in the last war. I see, he said quietly. I take it, then, that you and the Governor-General are of a similar mind. Chikij Kaujak had apprised him of the human leader's words, and the underlying emotions she had perceived from him. It doesn't matter, she said. I'm here to do a job, and I'll carry out my orders, regardless of whatever feelings I may have in regards to them. She let those words hang between them for a moment, before continuing. But despite any personal opinions about the Konim, even I recognize we're all in this together. The Masters want all of us dead, so if I have to make a deal with El Diablo to protect my home, then I'll damn well do it. Jiaj slowly nodded in understanding. Very well, Admiral. It shall be as you say. We will withdraw, and live to fight another day. Good, she replied. And once we're safely clear, I invite you to come aboard my ship. There's a little plan we've been working on I'd like to show you, though I doubt you will much care for it. Does it hurt the Masters? He asked quietly. It does, she nodded, at a price. The Diaksh took a deep breath. The Konim know all about paying the blood price, Admiral. I look forward to reviewing your plan. A thin smile appeared on her face. Then when you arrive, I'll read you in on Operation Bankshot.